Come along with me as I say bye-bye to this old and outdated orange. This is a great dresser, but it really doesn't have much damage other than some parts of the finish that are probably from water damage or something they're failing. So I'm going to take out all the drawers, and you'll notice that as I'm taking them out, I've got a Sharpie in my hand and I am numbering the drawers, because by the time you move them around and sand them here and move them over there for hardware and this, they're all in a completely different order. And vintage furniture really likes to be in its spot with its drawers. So first thing I want to do with this dresser is I'm going to cut these scalloped edges on the bottom. I'm using some painter's tape to create the line that I'm going to cut. I want to leave, because these feet, you'll see they kind of curve out, I want to leave a bit of a curve. So I'm not going to completely straighten the edges out, just this part that goes across the bottom. And I don't know why my camera was going crazy with the lighting here, but I'm using a jigsaw with a fine wood blade on it. This is a well-built dresser, and this is very thick. I sped it up because this was actually a long process. You'll see here in real time. At least 3/4 of an inch thick. So even though I've got a nice blade on my jigsaw, this is still going to go slow. But same process on the side. I put the tape there, and then I go ahead and cut everything with the jigsaw. Again, now you can see the arch that comes up from the foot, and I kept that. I liked that detail. I just didn't like the scalloped part in the middle. So I'm just sanding down the edges here. I leave the tape on initially just to make sure, if I had anything that needed to be straightened with the sander, I could do it first. Then I take the tape off and go ahead and sand this area of the base. It sure is easier to do with the dresser laying down. I'm also going to take this opportunity to sand anything on the cabinet itself that is flat. A lot of the edges and the corners and things have raised areas and rounded parts, but as much as I can do with flat parts with my orbital, I will do, because it saves a lot of time. So now I'm going to go in and start working on the top. I have 120 grit sandpaper on here. I'm using my series grit sandpaper, which is my favorite, and just working on it. You can see as you go over it, it's the part that really lightens up. That's the part that's coming off. I'm not going to necessarily strip this entire thing, but I really want to get that finish off of there that's failing. And the sander just wasn't cutting it, so I decided to get out the carbide scraper and just go to town getting off those areas that were damaged. And now just finishing back up with the sander again to get everything smoothed back out. The areas that were like along the back of that were totally fine. Okay, now just going in with some cleaner. I just want to make sure everything is super clean underneath, because you get lots of sand and everything in there, especially since I was sawing and sanding with it laying down, and you want to make sure everything's clean. This is years of buildup underneath the hardware. It was like a ledge when I took that old hardware off. It's crazy, but it all came off. I always make sure and clean that so that when you go to sand, you're not gunking up your sandpaper with stuff like that. I went ahead and filled in all the hardware holes with Bondo, because I'm completely changing the hardware. This was very old vintage, kind of a batwing, like a modified batwing version. I didn't like it, so we're going to go ahead and make it something nice and modern. As I'm doing the Bondo, I'm also going to go ahead and scuff sand the rest of the entire drawer. And now with sandpaper, I'm going to go ahead and do the edges. There's a flat surface on the top, and then it's rounded at the edge. And this is what we call a crumb catcher. You can see how much stuff is coming out of that edge. Crazy. I'll be sure to do every inch. I go around each and every drawer because they all have these ledges. And then now I'm getting everything cleaned up, ready to go, because it's nearly time to prime. And again, you just have to pay some special attention to that little ledge there, or that you can see the detail that goes around each drawer. So with my fingernail, I go around and just make sure all the dust is out. I have a Wagner spray tent that I'm going to use today. When I'm just doing a couple pieces, I'll just set this tent up and do them in my garage. When I'm going full assembly line, I set up a large one in my driveway, but this one will do great for just a single dresser. There's more space inside the tent than there is getting through the drawer, so no worries there. Okay, you can see I've already primed the side, so I'm just showing you the front. This is Insulex Sticks Primer. It's a great primer. It is a bonding primer, a water-based bonding primer. Just putting a nice even coat on every surface. Since I really had to sand quite a bit, I want to make sure it's all fully primed. Even though I'm using an all-in-one paint, I still like to prime. The all-in-one paint, fantastic. The primer adds great coverage and everything to it. However, it doesn't react the same. I can't say it doesn't react the same. So this particular primer, when I get done with this and it dries, I can go in and sand it and make sure everything is super smooth, find any imperfections I may have and fill those with a little wood filler or whatever I need to do, and then move on to the paint. I find that if I go ahead and go in with an all-in-one paint first, I skip that step where I have the primer that I can sand really well. And it's just a preference. I really prefer to do it this way. It does, add a little more work and one more layer, but I prefer it. So after the primer is completely dry, I go in with a sponge. It's about a 320 grit, and I'm just sanding everything. If you were to go across this with your hand, it feels a little like sandpaper because the water-based paint or primer raises the grain a bit, and you just want to go in and smooth it all down. You see, I don't have to go crazy with the sanding, but I am covering the entire surface. It will make it nice and smooth. I've loaded my paint in my sprayer, and I have a piece of cardboard that's standing up that I always test everything on. I'm testing the flow and making sure the spray pattern is what I want it to look like. This is one of my favorite paint brands. It's Evolution by Farmhouse. It is an all-in-one paint, as I mentioned, and it just goes on so smooth. So I'm one of those kids that when I had a coloring book, I used to do the outlines first and then color everything in, and I can't seem to put that away. I still do it even as I'm painting. So I do the edges first and then go in and fill in the middle. Now, when I'm painting with drawers in like this that sit on the outside of the cabinet, you have to kind of angle the sprayer so you get the top of the drawer, the middle, then the bottom of the drawer, and then the next top of the drawer. You can see I'm moving my sprayer around and angling it. I'm also overlapping each pass. So you want to feather the edges, and that overlapping creates a nice, even finish. And you'll see the inside of the tent has a little more room. So just spraying the top. See, I'm overlapping those layers by probably close to 50%. I really overlap them. I love the spray texture. Spraying is just the best finish. So I allowed that to dry, and I sanded it with the same sponge that I did after the primer. And now I'm going in with my second coat. It's the exact same process. Real-time painting is so soothing to watch. I even like to watch it, and I'm the one painting it. Okay, so we've got a nice even second coat of paint on there. And I'm gonna set up my fan and just let that dry for a while. This is what happens when you paint with the drawers in, and I get lots of questions about painting with the drawers in. Why do I do it this way? Well, one, this is all I have to touch up, and it saves me so much time without having to tape and mask off every space of the drawer. Because if you take all the drawers out and you're going to paint the cabinet, every time you paint one of those edges there in the front, you spray paint on the inside, and see, mine is nice and clean. The other thing I like to do is paint underneath, especially that front lip. And no, you don't have to lay down on the floor and paint upside down, but I, for some reason, didn't feel like taking this off of the wheels and laying it down again, so I decided to just, lay on the floor and paint upside down. I'm figuring out the hardware placement. So this is a chest on chest style, and the 3 bottom drawers are wider than the 3 top drawers. So putting handles or pulls on everything is a little hard because they don't line up. So what I typically tend to do with this style is do pulls on the bottom half and the knobs on the top. So I'm just figuring out where the middle is and the edge, and I'm setting up my hardware jig. The part that's in my left hand there is what will hit the edge of the dresser, and then I'm figuring out the whole placement. These are 5-inch pulls, so those outside holes will be 5 inches apart. This makes it so much easier and accurate. And then before I actually start marking, and certainly before I start drilling, I always go in and just measure one last time, because the last thing you want to do is drill holes in the wrong place on your freshly painted dresser and have to redo them. That's no fun. Of course, take some time to make sure you pet the dog. This is Henry. He's my little helper today. I'm just going in and marking with pencil. And then because the pencil on dark, it's kind of hard to see, I just follow up with a Sharpie. I would use the Sharpie to start with, but it doesn't fit down into the holes on the jig. All right, time to drill some holes. I've got lots of them to do, but when you've got them all marked, this is quick. Okay, one of the last things I always do is, especially with vintage pieces, is this is Howard's Feed and Wax, and I go in and just condition the drawers. This has a lovely orange citrus smell to it, but it just, nourishes the wood. And these are 50, 60 years old. That wood is just dry. And this just brings it back to life. These drawers are in a beautiful condition. They just needed to have a little drink of something. All right, that's the moment of truth. You put your screws in and the hardware on and hope that they are exactly in the right place where they need to be. So I was able to get the pulls on there just right, but my screws are too long. So to fix that, I'm just gonna put a washer or a couple on the screw and then place it in. That will make the screw, or the reveal of the screw, shorter, of course. This is what it looks like when it's all done. And here it is, the finished dresser. No more orange. This is a beautiful chest on chest, dark blue dresser now. Let me know what you think.